Hello, and welcome to the next lesson in our series about communication in our course on communication, research, and analysis for scientists and engineers. In this lesson, we're going to look at how to approach outlining and feedback. If you can do them well, they will really speed up the way you work. Learning to outline will allow you to split two very different activities from each other, thinking about what you want to say and writing sentences and paragraphs that convey that message effectively. Once those are split, you can get feedback before you've properly written a word. This is hugely helpful because it means you will be much more receptive to any criticism because you can change things with very little effort, and you will already be on your second draft by the time you start writing. There's no new reading for this lesson, but the rest of this video assumes that you have read chapters 5 and 6 of Explaining the Future, at least up to the structure section. If you haven't had a chance to yet, I strongly recommend you stop this video and go read those chapters now. We're going to start from the point where you've done, or you think you've done, all the research and other technical work that you needed to do before starting the writing process. Your next step is to find some time to think. To capture your thoughts, you can scribble, make mind maps, or type. But at this stage, you're trying to capture facts and ideas in a word or two, not sentences, and certainly not paragraphs. When you first sit down, allow yourself half an hour or so to try to do a brain dump. Try to write down every single thing you want to make sure to say in your report or presentation. Let your mind wander over all the different aspects of the project, the choices and the compromises made, the results, the equipment, and the goals. Every time you think about something you need to mention, write it down. However, that's not the end of the thinking process. You need to give it time. Make sure to go back to add your notes every day or two, ideally for at least a week. Your brain will also be working away on the problem in the background. Make sure you're prepared to note down each must-say as it pops into your mind, usually at the least convenient time. Once you're convinced that you've captured all this information, which will likely involve a lot more notes than you see here, your next step is to add structure. Start by writing down the basic elements of the technical argument, possibly adapted to make it fit your specific task, and organize your material within this structure. Once you've managed to do that, you'll likely find that there are gaps, elements in the argument that you forgot to think about. It should be straightforward to systematically fill these gaps now that you've identified them, although this may involve going back and doing a bit more research. Once that's all done, you should have an outline that's solid. You're not finished thinking, though. You may have a good structure and know what details you want to include, but at this point, you need to think about the audience, as we discussed in the audience and explanation lesson. Who are they? What do they understand? What do they want? How much detail do they need you to go into? Go through your outline and think about each of the concepts or facts you've included. With each one, ask, do they know about this? Do they need to know? Will they be able to understand? Will they recognize the terms you are using? Do they need to know these terms? Specifically, you want to go through and simplify your explanations to the appropriate level, especially for the key concepts. You may need to go over them a few times to think about how to convey each idea in the cleanest possible way. You also need to eliminate jargon. There are so many words that we take for granted but are baffling to people in other disciplines. So, the next job is to try to second-guess which words they will understand and which they won't. If you know a word is going to cause confusion, then you need to try to eliminate it. Miss it out of your report entirely, and what your reader doesn't know, your reader won't worry about. Of course, there will be jargon words and associated ideas that you can't do without. In these cases, you need to make sure to define them and make sure to do so without using more jargon. Now you have an outline, but to paraphrase this famous quote, no outline survives first contact with the audience. So, what you need to do is to get that first contact over with. So, first think about your audience and try to find someone who you think is typical of that group. If the audience will be diverse, try to choose someone who is as different from you as possible. Once they've agreed to do it, you want to sit down with a copy of your outline and talk them through your story step by step, explaining as you go. Unfortunately, as you go through this process, you cannot just ask whether they understand and take smiling and nodding to mean you've done a great job. Why? Because everybody lies. People can be annoyingly polite when they're in one-to-one situations. They feel they have to pretend to know what you're talking about. First, you have to look at their face. Although they may be smiling and nodding much of the time, you can look for micro-expressions that show they don't follow. Also, don't just ask them whether they understand. Ask them questions about the content itself. Have them repeat it back to you, but in their own words. If they don't understand, roll backwards to the point where they got lost and try to explain it in a different way. If that doesn't work, try again until you find something that does. Don't forget to take notes about the words and ideas that caused confusion, the explanations that seemed to help, and the context that was missing. This will make it much easier for you to move forward once you're ready to fix your outline and start writing. Finally, while all this is going on, embrace the criticism you receive. If your trial audience member has listened to you attentively, then it's your fault, not theirs, if they can't follow. Maybe you didn't explain a concept well. Maybe you didn't make a clear argument or set up the point of the work, or maybe you simply chose the wrong person to give you feedback. In any of these cases, it's not their fault, so don't argue with them about whether they should understand or not. Now you've got your feedback, you can go back in and fix your outline, making sure to incorporate everything you've learned. When that's done, you can start writing or putting together your presentation. These are both difficult tasks, and we'll discuss how to do them well later, but you'll find them much, much easier with the outline than you would have without. Feel free to take a minute to celebrate when you finished your draft, but remember there is still one stage to go before you show it to anyone. First, you have to wait. A couple of days for a short piece, longer for something more substantial. You need to get on with other things so that when you come back to it, you will have fresh eyes. Finally, you need to edit. Go through and see what makes sense, what is logical, what is readable, and fix what isn't. That's it for our video on outlining and feedback. If anything was unclear, it may help to go back and review chapters 5 and 6 of Explaining the Future.